A millionaire catches his triplets crying, trying to open the door where the nanny was locked in by their stepmother. Without a phone and locked inside for hours, she guided the children using only her voice. What was meant to be a simple trip became the most decisive moment of his life. That was when the father realized who truly belonged in that home and who never should have entered. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Now, on with the story. The light March rain painted the apartment windows in shades of gray, casting a translucent veil over New York City. Marina held the handle of her suitcase tightly, her knuckles white from the pressure, as she stared at the imposing building on Park Avenue. It wasn't the kind of place someone like her ever imagined being. No college degree, no extensive resume, just a reference from a distant acquaintance and the urgent need to start over. Her entire life fit into that one worn-out suitcase and 2 plastic bags she'd left at the front desk. She looked at her own reflection in the mirrored glass door. 32 years old, brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, clothes that were clean but faded from countless washes. Nothing about her matched the Italian marble of the lobby, the crystal chandeliers, or the uniformed doorman who had eyed her with suspicion before letting her in. Marina took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of her thoughts. She needed this job. More than that, she needed a reason to wake up in the morning. The intercom buzzed once, then again. When the door finally opened, it was Robert who appeared, tall, with broad shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of the entire building, his hair slightly gray at the temples, which contrasted with his still youthful face. Deep dark circles under his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. He had to be around 40, maybe younger, but his eyes seemed to have aged decades. He wore a wrinkled dress shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and slacks that had probably once been part of a full suit. He didn't smile. He just nodded and said, "Come in," his voice hoarse like someone who hadn't used it for more than the bare minimum in a long time. The apartment was spacious and modern, with clean-lined furniture and decor that looked like it had been done by a professional interior designer. Abstract paintings on the walls, a dark wood bookshelf filled with books organized by color, hardwood floors that reflected the natural light from the wide windows. But something was deeply out of place. Toys were scattered across the living room floor like wreckage from a shipwreck, baby bottles, with leftover milk sat on the coffee table, and the smell of spilled milk mingled with the scent of recent cleaning products. Diapers were folded over the arm of the gray leather sofa, pacifiers forgotten in unlikely places. It was a beautiful home, desperately trying to hide its chaos, like a wound covered with a pretty but inadequate bandage. Marina also noticed the absence. There were no photos on the walls, no smiling family portraits, no framed memories of happy moments, just the abstract paintings and a heavy silence that seemed to have settled into every corner. Robert led her to the living room, his strides long and decisive like someone used to being in command, but with a slight hesitation that revealed the role of host wasn't one he played often. He pointed to the sofa. "Please, have a seat." His voice remained formal, distant, as if he were in a business meeting and not interviewing someone who would share the most intimate space of his home. Marina obeyed, sitting on the edge of the sofa, her back straight, her hands clasped in her lap. He stood for a few seconds, hands in his pockets, staring at some random point on the urban horizon that stretched out beyond the window. New York City buzzed below, indifferent to the personal dramas unfolding on the 22nd floor. Horns blared, people rushed, life followed its relentless course. Robert finally turned around. The conversation was direct, no beating around the bush as if every word cost him immense effort. He had 3 children, triplets, 9 months old. His wife had left a few days after they were born. He didn't say passed away, he didn't say died, he didn't say he'd lost her, just left, as if she were a train that had continued its journey without explanation, leaving disoriented passengers behind on an empty platform. Marina understood that some pains didn't need to be named. She knew that kind of language, the careful choice of words that tried to soften the unbearable. Robert continued. He said he'd tried hiring professional nannies, 3 of them in the last few months. The first lasted 2 weeks and quit, claiming she couldn't handle it. The second stayed for a month, but had an anxiety attack and had to leave. The third simply stopped showing up after a week, without a word, without an explanation. He was exhausted. His mother, who lived in Stamford, came to help now and then, but she was getting older and couldn't keep up with the intense routine. He needed someone to take full responsibility for the children. It wasn't just a job. It was total responsibility, a complete surrender. Sleeping in the room next door, waking up in the middle of the night as many times as necessary, understanding different cries, interpreting needs before they turned into desperation. He would be present, of course, but his job as a VP of Finance at a multinational corporation required constant travel to D.C., Chicago, sometimes overseas. The company wouldn't wait for grief. The word hung in the air, heavy and real as a stone. Grief. Marina knew that word. She knew its texture intimately, the weight it carried in her chest, the way it settled in her throat and choked her. She didn't tell him everything that first day. She didn't say she had lost a baby 5 months earlier, at 28 weeks gestation, after she had already picked out a name, assembled the crib, and washed all the tiny clothes. She didn't mention that the dream of being a mother had shattered one hospital afternoon, amidst rushed doctors speaking in technical terms she didn't understand, and machines that beeped endlessly while her world fell apart. She didn't say that the apartment she shared with her ex-partner had become a silent tomb, where every room echoed with absence, where the empty crib in the corner of the bedroom was a cruel reminder of everything that should have been, but never was. She didn't tell him that he had left 2 weeks later, unable to deal with his own pain, let alone hers, that she was left alone in that too large space, hearing phantom cries in the middle of the night, waking up with empty arms and a chest aching with milk that would never be nursed. That she lost her job at the clothing store because she could no longer look at children without breaking down. That she had thought about giving up on everything several times, sitting on the edge of her bed at 3 a.m, staring into the void and wondering what the point of continuing was. She just said she could start immediately, that she understood babies, that she would take good care of them, that she was organized, responsible, and didn't mind a demanding routine. Robert watched her for a long moment, his tired eyes trying to decipher if there was something she wasn't saying. Marina held his gaze. There was indeed a lot she wasn't saying, but none of it would change her ability to do the job. Robert took her to the Triplets' room, 3 cribs lined up, each with a different colored sheet, blue, green, yellow. The babies were sleeping, small bundles wrapped in blankets. Marina felt her chest tighten. For a moment she thought about running, but then one of them stirred, making a soft sound, almost a sigh, and something inside her broke in a different way. It wasn't pain, it was recognition. She accepted. The first few days were a silent battle against herself. Marina would wake before dawn to the baby's cries and feel her heart race. They were Lucas, Peter, and Sophia. The oldest by 3 minutes was Lucas, always the first to complain about being hungry. Peter was the middle one, quiet, observant, who cried softly as if apologizing for the trouble. Sophia was the smallest but the most determined, with a cry that pierced the silence and demanded immediate attention. Marina learned to distinguish each cry in less than a week. She knew when it was hunger, when it was a wet diaper, when it was just the desire to be held. She created routines that hadn't existed before, baths at fixed times, staggered naps, lullabies sung in a low voice as she rocked one at a time. Robert watched from a distance, impressed by the ease with which she turned chaos into order. But it wasn't ease, it was survival. Every time she held Sophia, Marina felt the ghost of the child she never held. Every time she fed Lucas, she remembered the empty room she had left behind. Every one of Peter's toothless smiles was a painful reminder of what could have been, and still, she didn't stop. Because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant falling apart. The weeks turned into months. Robert began to trust her more, leaving for meetings without calling 3 times to check if everything was okay. Marina slept in the room next to the children's, the door always ajar. She would wake at the slightest noise and often didn't even need to get up, just listening to their breathing was enough to go back to sleep knowing they were safe. One night, Lucas had a fever. Marina knew it even before she touched him from the way he was crying. Different, distressed. She got the thermometer, took his temperature, and saw the number climb. 101.5. It wasn't serious, but it was worrying for such a small baby. She wet a washcloth with lukewarm water, applied compresses, and removed the extra blankets. She stayed by his side all night, checking his temperature every hour, humming softly, getting him to take small sips of water. When Robert woke up at 6 in the morning, he found Marina sitting on the floor next to the crib, thermometer in hand, her eyes red with exhaustion but still watchful. Lucas was sleeping peacefully, the fever now under control. Robert didn't say anything. He just placed a hand on her shoulder, a brief touch that said everything. "Thank you." It was the first time Marina felt like she was in the right place. The triplets started to crawl. The house became a minefield of potential dangers. Marina spent days installing outlet covers, cabinet locks, and safety gates on the stairs. Robert offered to help, but she insisted on doing it herself. She needed to have control over every detail. She needed to ensure that nothing bad would happen on her watch. The first words came in quick succession. "Mama" was the first. Sophia, always the most vocal, shouted the sound one morning while Marina was changing her diaper. Her heart skipped a beat. She looked at the little girl, her eyes wide, and whispered, "What did you say?" Sophia repeated it, louder this time. "Mama." Marina sat down on the floor, her legs trembling. It wasn't for her. It couldn't be for her. She was the caregiver, the employee, the person who was there because she needed a job and because these children needed care. But Sophia kept repeating it, slapping her little hands on the changing pad, smiling that smile that could melt any defense. "Mama." When Robert came home that night, Marina told him. He was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "It's natural," he said. "You've been with them from the beginning. You're their reference point. Don't worry. It's okay." Marina didn't know if it was okay, but she also didn't know if she wanted it to be any different. The following months brought a comfortable routine. The children grew healthy, hitting developmental milestones on time. Lucas took his first steps holding Marina's hand. Peter learned to say water and would point to his cup whenever he was thirsty. Sophia developed a taste for music and would dance awkwardly whenever she heard any melody. Robert, little by little, was also rebuilding himself. The dark circles under his eyes faded. He started to smile again, albeit reservedly. He began to participate more in the children's routine, giving them baths on weekends, reading stories before bed. Marina noticed the transformation and felt like a part of it. She wasn't just a caregiver. She was a witness to a family putting itself back together. But what she didn't know was that this sense of stability was about to be challenged. Robert started going out more often. Business dinners, corporate events, social gatherings. He always let her know, always came back at the agreed-upon time. But there was something different in the air. A subtle shift that Marina couldn't yet name. It was a Saturday afternoon, with the children playing in the living room under Marina's watchful eye when the doorbell rang. Robert was in his office wrapped up in an important call. Marina answered it. On the other side of the door stood a tall, elegant woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that seemed rehearsed. "Hi, you must be the nanny. Is Robert in?" Marina felt something clench in her chest. Not because of the word nanny, which was technically true, but because of the way it was said, with a delicacy that carried disdain. She opened the door and called for Robert. The woman came in, greeted the children with a polite distance, and sat on the sofa as if she already knew every detail of the place. Robert made the introductions. "Marina, this is Jessica. Jessica, Marina." They exchanged glances, a quick, formal greeting. Jessica smiled again, but her eyes were busy analyzing. Marina noticed. She noticed the way she looked at the scattered toys, at the children running around the room, at the sofa where Marina had spent so many nights rocking babies who couldn't sleep. The visit was brief. Jessica and Robert went out to dinner. Marina stayed with the children, put them all to bed, and cleaned up the mess in the living room. When she finally lay down, it was well past midnight. She stared at the ceiling, her hands crossed over her chest, and felt a tightness she couldn't explain. Something had changed, and she didn't yet know how much. In the following weeks, Jessica started showing up more frequently, always elegant, always polite, always with that smile that didn't reach her eyes. She brought gifts for the children, expensive toys that were left forgotten in a corner, while Lucas, Peter, and Sophia preferred to play with pots and wooden spoons. Jessica tried to interact, but it was obvious she didn't get it. She asked basic questions like if they were hungry or sleepy, without realizing that each child had specific cues that Marina already knew by heart. Robert seemed happy, or at least lighter. He spoke of Jessica with admiration. He told Marina about the places they visited, the plans they were making. Marina listened in silence, nodding when necessary, but inside she felt a growing emptiness. It wasn't jealousy, or at least she didn't want to believe it was. It was fear. Fear that everything she had built with so much effort would be dismantled by someone who didn't understand what it meant to be there from the beginning. One afternoon, while Marina was preparing the children's snack, Jessica walked into the kitchen. She stood by the counter, arms crossed, observing. "You're very dedicated," she said, in a tone Marina couldn't decipher. "They're lucky to have you." Marina thanked her without looking up, continuing to cut fruit. Jessica went on. "It must be exhausting, though, taking care of 3 children all by yourself. Do you have any help?" Marina took a deep breath. "Robert helps when he can, and I don't mind. I love them." Jessica smiled. "It really is a special relationship, almost as if they were your own." The silence that followed was thick. Marina put the knife in the sink, washed her hands, and finally looked at Jessica. "They are special to me, yes, but I know my place." Jessica nodded slowly, the smile still on her face but her eyes cold. "Good. It's important to know where we fit in, isn't it?" Marina didn't answer. She picked up the tray of cut fruit and left the kitchen, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. In that moment she knew. She knew that Jessica wasn't just a passing presence. She was a threat, and the battle for the soul of that home was just beginning. The following months brought a routine that Marina grew to love with an intensity that scared her. She would wake before 6 in the morning to the first cry, usually from Lucas, and start the day by preparing bottles while the other 2 woke up in sequence, as if there were a synchronized internal clock between them. Baths were a sacred ritual. Warm water, gentle soap. Songs sung softly as her careful hands washed every tiny finger, every fold of soft skin. Peter always tried to drink the bathwater. Sophia complained about the shampoo even when it didn't get in her eyes, and Lucas would splash the water with his little hands, soaking Marina from head to toe. She didn't mind. Every drop was a small victory against the emptiness that had inhabited her for so long. Every toothless smile was a reminder that life insisted on moving forward, even when you thought there was no reason to. Marina discovered that caring for those 3 children wasn't just a job. It was a form of healing she didn't even know she needed. Robert was changing too. The dark circles under his eyes gradually faded, replaced by a light in his eyes that hadn't been there when Marina arrived. He started to participate more, not just as a provider, but as a present father. On weekends, he took over bath time while Marina made breakfast. He read stories with funny voices that made the triplets laugh until they were breathless. He played hide-and-seek even when he was tired, crawled on the floor making animal sounds, and built block towers that the children loved to knock down. One Sunday afternoon, while Marina was folding laundry in the utility room, she heard bursts of laughter coming from the living room. She peeked through the door and saw Robert lying on the floor, all 3 babies on top of him as if they were climbers conquering a mountain. Lucas was pulling his hair, Peter had his little hands inside his father's mouth, and Sophia was patting his chest, humming something incomprehensible. Robert was laughing, a genuine, deep laugh that echoed through the whole apartment. Marina felt a strange tightness in her chest. Happiness, that's what she felt. Vicarious happiness, perhaps, but real nonetheless. But peace has a peculiar way of being temporary. It was on a rainy Tuesday in June that everything began to change. Robert came home earlier than usual, bringing with him a woman Marina had never seen before. Jessica was everything Marina was not. Tall, elegant, with perfectly styled blonde hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders. She wore a tailored burgundy suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Marina's salary. Her nails were manicured, her makeup flawless, even after a full day of work. She walked into the apartment with the familiarity of someone who already knew the way, which indicated this wasn't her first visit. Marina was in the living room with the children, who were playing with building blocks scattered on the rug. She stood up immediately, wiping her hands on her slightly faded jeans. Robert made the introductions with a smile Marina rarely saw. "Jessica, this is Marina, my children's caregiver. Marina, Jessica is a colleague from work. We met at a conference in D.C. and have been seeing each other." Jessica extended her hand. The grip was firm but cold. "A pleasure to meet you. Robert speaks very highly of your work with the children." Her voice was smooth, polite, but there was something in her brown eyes that Marina couldn't quite decipher. A silent assessment, perhaps. A measuring of territory. The children, who were usually wary of new people, continued playing without paying much attention. Jessica tried to approach, crouching awkwardly in her high heels. "Hello, little ones." The tone was what adults use when they don't know exactly how to talk to children. Sophia looked at her for 2 seconds and went back to her blocks. Lucas didn't even look up. Peter got up and went straight to Marina, hugging her leg. Marina saw the discomfort flash across Jessica's face before she recomposed her smile. "They're shy," Robert said, trying to smooth things over. "No, they're not," Marina thought, but didn't say. "They just know how to recognize who really cares." Jessica started showing up more often, always on weekends, always impeccable, always bringing gifts the children barely touched. A giant teddy bear that was left forgotten in the corner of the room. Expensive English books that were too advanced for their age. Designer clothes that were uncomfortable and impractical for babies who spent their days crawling and exploring. Marina felt the growing tension. Jessica tried to insert herself into the family's routine, but every attempt was a silent disaster. She didn't know the right temperature for the bottles. She prepared baby food the children rejected. She tried to put them to bed at the wrong time, provoking crying fits. And always, she looked at Marina with a mixture of frustration and something deeper. Envy, perhaps, or resentment. One Saturday morning, Marina was making coffee when she overheard Jessica talking to Robert in the living room. Her voice was louder than usual, laced with a restrained emotion. "I don't understand why you need someone full-time. The children are older now. I could help. We could do this together." Robert's reply was calm but firm. "Jessica, you work just as much as I do, and Marina isn't just an employee. She's essential to the children. They need stability, someone who knows every detail of their routine." "But I could learn," Jessica insisted. "I want to be a part of this. I want them to see me as someone important too." There was a pause. Marina held her breath, pretending to be busy stirring the coffee. Robert spoke more quietly, but she could still hear him. "You are important to me, but this takes time. The children need to feel secure. We can't just change everything overnight." Marina felt a pang in her chest. Change. The word echoed in her mind like an omen. She had grown too accustomed to this place, this routine, these children. She had allowed herself to put down roots in soil that might not be hers. And roots, when they're pulled up, hurt. The following weeks were marked by small conflicts. Jessica started suggesting changes. "How about we switch pediatricians? I know an excellent one who caters to New York's elite. How about enrolling the children in a private daycare for a few hours a day? Socialization is important. How about redecorating their room? This style is too childish." Robert listened patiently, but always consulted Marina before making any decisions. And Marina, with the experience of someone who spent 24 hours a day with the triplets, always had solid arguments. The current pediatrician knows their entire history. Daycare can wait another year. They're still too young. The room's decor was designed to stimulate their development without sensory overload. Each refusal was a small defeat for Jessica. And Marina began to realize she was becoming an obstacle. She was no longer just the competent caregiver. She was the person preventing Jessica from taking on the role she desired. The role of the woman of the house, of the mother. One day, while Marina was changing Sophia's diaper, Jessica entered the children's room. She stood in the doorway, watching in silence. Marina felt the gaze burning her back, but continued what she was doing, talking softly to Sophia about the day, about the bird that had landed on the window, about how fast she was growing. "You're very good at this," Jessica said suddenly. Marina turned. "Thank you, it's what I do." Jessica walked to the window, her arms crossed over her chest. "It must be hard, though, taking care of children who aren't yours, getting attached, knowing that one day you'll have to leave." Marina felt as if she'd been punched in the gut, but she kept her face neutral. "I don't think about that. I just think about doing my job as best as I can." Jessica looked at her, and for the first time, Marina saw the vulnerability behind the mask of perfection. "They love you, they call you Mama. You realize that, don't you?" Marina swallowed hard. "They're children. They associate care with the word. It doesn't mean anything more than that." Jessica gave a sad smile. "You know it does, and I know you wish it were true." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Marina finished changing Sophia, placed her carefully in the crib, and finally faced Jessica. "I know my place. I always have. I didn't come here to replace anyone. I came to take care of 3 children who needed someone, and that's what I do, nothing more." Jessica nodded, slowly. "Good, because Robert and I are getting serious, and when that happens, when he's ready to move on, things are going to change. You understand, don't you?" Marina understood perfectly. She understood that Jessica wasn't just a passing girlfriend. She understood that plans were being made. A future was being designed, where there might not be room for a caregiver the children loved too much. She understood that she would eventually have to make a painful decision, stay and watch her role be diminished bit by bit, or leave before the cut was too deep. That night, after the children were asleep, Marina sat on the balcony of her room looking out at the illuminated city. New York City glittered below, millions of lives happening simultaneously, each with its own dramas and joys. She thought about everything she had experienced in those months. She thought about the difficult first days, the sleepless nights, the smiles that made her believe life was still worth living. She thought about Lucas, Peter, and Sophia, and how each of them had filled the void that her previous loss had left. But she also thought about Jessica, and for the first time she tried to see the situation from her point of view. A woman in love trying to build a family, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be loved, wanting to prove she could be good enough, and finding, with every attempt, an invisible but insurmountable barrier. The bond Marina had built with those children was genuine, born of time and constant care. It wasn't something that could be bought or rushed. And maybe, Marina thought sadly, maybe Jessica realized that and felt powerless. The phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Robert. "Can you come down to the living room? Please, I need to talk to you." Marina went downstairs, her heart heavy. Robert was sitting on the sofa, his posture tense. Jessica wasn't there. "Sit down, Marina." She obeyed. Robert took a deep breath. "I've noticed the tension between you and Jessica. I know it hasn't been easy, for either of you." Marina just listened. "I want you to know that your place here is secure. You're part of this family. The children love you, and I trust you completely. Nothing is going to change that." Marina felt a momentary relief, but Robert continued. "That being said, I also need to build my life. Jessica is important to me. I'm trying to find a balance between what I need as a man and what my children need as children." He looked at her directly. "You understand what I'm saying?" Marina understood. She understood that he was asking for patience, asking her to at least try to build some kind of bridge with Jessica, asking her not to make things harder than they already were. And Marina, because she loved those children more than her own pain, agreed to try. But what neither of them knew was that Jessica had already decided that trying wasn't enough, that the only solution in her mind was a radical change, and that this change was about to happen in a way no one could have predicted. The following days were deceptively calm. Jessica seemed to have backed off, her visits becoming less frequent. Marina went back to focusing entirely on the children, who were in a wonderful phase of development. Lucas started saying "dada" clearly. Peter discovered he could open drawers and began exploring every corner of the house with scientific curiosity. Sophia developed an obsession with music and would ask Marina to sing the same song 10 times in a row without getting tired. Marina mentally recorded everything, knowing these moments were precious and fleeting. Children grow up too fast, and she wanted to save every detail. The way Lucas furrowed his brow when he was concentrating. How Peter always offered his favorite toy when someone was sad. How Sophia danced even without music, just because her body needed to move. On a particularly quiet afternoon, while the children were taking their afternoon nap, Marina sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea. The apartment was silent, just the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows. She looked around at this space that had become more of a home to her than any other place she had ever lived. She knew every corner, every cabinet, every stain on the wall where Sophia had thrown food months ago, and that Marina never had the heart to clean completely because it was a mark of life, of genuine, happy mess. She thought about her life before, the empty apartment, the blank white walls, the deafening silence that accompanied her day and night. She thought about the woman she was when she arrived. Here, fragile, broken, carrying a pain that seemed endless, and she looked at who she had become. There was still pain, there always would be, but now it coexisted with something stronger. Purpose, belonging, love, even if it wasn't in the way she had imagined. Her phone vibrated on the table, a text from Robert. "I have to travel to DC next week, 3 days. Can you handle them on your own?" Marina's response was immediate. "Of course. Don't worry about a thing." She didn't know that this trip would be the catalyst for everything that was to come. She didn't know that Jessica was waiting for exactly this, for an opportunity when Robert wouldn't be present. She didn't know that the calm of those days was just the deep breath before the storm. That night, after putting the triplets to bed, Marina went to each of their rooms to check if they were covered. Lucas was sleeping on his stomach, his bottom high in the air. Peter had his thumb in his mouth, even after Marina had tried to take it out 3 times. Sophia was spread out in her crib, her arms and legs open like a starfish. Marina smiled, feeling her chest swell with an affection so intense it almost hurt. She kissed each of their foreheads, whispered, "I love you," even though she knew they wouldn't hear, and went to her room. She lay down, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how strange life was. How sometimes losing everything leads you exactly where you need to be. How pain could eventually transform into something that looked a lot like happiness. But while Marina drifted off to sleep, somewhere else in the city, Jessica was sitting in her modern apartment, a glass of red wine in hand, staring at her phone. She had just confirmed Robert's trip. 3 days, 72 hours, enough time to change everything. Jessica wasn't evil, not in the traditional sense. She was just a desperate woman trying to find her place in a story that had started without her. A woman who had recently received a devastating diagnosis: low ovarian reserve, minimal chances of conceiving naturally. The dream of having her own children was dissolving, and there, in Robert's home, were 3 beautiful children who could be hers. If only she could prove she was capable. If only she could show that Marina wasn't irreplaceable. She took another sip of wine, the plan forming in her mind with crystal clarity. It wasn't perfect, there were risks, but she was tired of being the eternal visitor. She wanted to be the lady of the house, the mother, the essential person. And for that, Marina had to get out of the way. Not permanently, of course, just long enough for Jessica to prove her worth, long enough for the children to realize that she could take care of them too. What Jessica didn't understand, what she perhaps never could, was that motherhood isn't a competition. You win with strategy. It's a bond built second by second, sleepless night after sleepless night, soothed cry after soothed cry. It can't be forced, rushed, or stolen, but she was about to discover that truth in the most painful way possible. Monday dawned with a clear sky over New York City, the kind of day when the city seems to promise new beginnings. Robert was packing his travel bag in the bedroom, checking his documents for the third time. The meeting in D.C. was important, crucial for a project he'd been developing for months. He went downstairs to say goodbye to the children, who were having breakfast under Marina's watchful eye. Lucas had baby food stuck in his hair. Peter was trying to put the spoon in his nose instead of his mouth, and Sophia was banging her hand on her high-chair tray, creating a rhythm only she could understand. Marina was cleaning, feeding, and talking, all at the same time, with a coordination that seemed natural, but was the result of months of intense practice. Robert kissed each child, left a list of emergency numbers that Marina already had memorized, and hesitated at the door. "Are you sure? You'll be okay. I can cancel if you need me to." Marina smiled, that tired but genuine smile. "Go on. Don't worry. We'll manage here. We've done this before." He nodded and left. Marina had no idea that would be the last moment of normalcy for a long time. That in the next 24 hours, everything she had built would be tested in a way she could never have predicted. The day passed normally. Baths, playtime, naps. Marina prepared the children's lunch while humming a song Sophia loved. The apartment was in its typical organized chaos, toys scattered but in their designated areas, clean clothes folded and waiting to be put away, sterilized bottles on the drying rack by the sink. It was mid-afternoon when the doorbell rang. Marina found it strange. She wasn't expecting anyone. She checked the intercom and saw Jessica on the screen. Her heart gave a strange leap, a feeling she couldn't name, but that put her on alert. "Jessica, what a surprise. Robert left this morning." "I know," Jessica replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Can I come up? I brought some things for the children." Marina hesitated for a second before buzzing her in. She opened the apartment door and waited. Jessica arrived carrying 2 bags from an expensive toy store. She walked in with familiarity, placed the bags on the sofa, and looked around as if she were assessing a territory that would soon be hers. The children were in the living room. Lucas was stacking blocks with an engineer's concentration, Peter was flipping through a fabric book, and Sophia was hugging a worn-out teddy bear that had been her favorite for months. None of them ran to Jessica. They barely glanced in her direction. "Hello, little ones," Jessica tried with that artificial voice. "I brought you presents." Marina watched as Jessica pulled electronic toys, remote-controlled cars, and dolls that spoke 3 languages from the bags, all expensive, all inappropriate for their age. "That's so kind of you," Marina said because she had to say something, "but they're still a little young for these things." Jessica looked at her with something sharp in her eyes. "It's never too early to stimulate their development." She approached Sophia, trying to place a doll in her arms. The little girl turned her face away and hugged her old teddy bear tighter. The atmosphere grew tense. Jessica stayed for another hour, trying to interact with the children who systematically ignored her. Each rejection was an open wound. Every time they sought out Marina instead of her was a silent defeat. When she finally left, she promised to come back the next day to help. Marina locked the door with a sigh of relief she didn't fully understand. Something was wrong, something her instinct was picking up on, but that her rational mind couldn't process. She continued with the afternoon routine. Baths, dinner, calmer playtime to prepare for bed. By 8 o'clock, all 3 were in their cribs. Marina sang their usual lullaby, checked that they were all comfortable, left the nightlight on, and went to her room. She took a quick shower, put on her pajamas, and decided to read a little before sleeping. Her phone was on the nightstand, charging. She checked her messages, one from Robert confirming he'd arrived safely in D.C. She lay down, thinking how nice it would be to have a full night's sleep without interruptions, knowing she probably wouldn't. Lucas usually woke up at least once asking for water, but she was so tired that sleep came, quickly, deep and heavy. It was 12:15 a.m. when Marina heard a noise. Or maybe she didn't hear it. Maybe it was just that mother's intuition, that internal radar that detects when something isn't right. She woke up fully alert, her heart racing. She lay still, listening. Silence. Maybe it had been a dream. She tried to go back to sleep, but something was bothering her. She got up to check on the children, turned the doorknob, and nothing happened. She turned it again. The door wouldn't open. It was locked from the outside. Marina's heart pounded. She knocked on the door, trying not to make too much noise so as not to scare the children. "Hello, is anyone there?" Nothing. She tried with more force. The door was solid, old, one of those solid wood doors with a lock that used a key on both sides. She ran to the nightstand to grab her phone. It wasn't there. She searched the dresser under the bed in the bathroom. It was gone. Panic began to rise in her throat like bile. She was locked in, with no way to communicate, and the children were on the other side. Marina threw her shoulder against the door, then her hip, ignoring the pain. She yelled louder, "Help, somebody, please!" The apartment had excellent soundproofing. No neighbor would hear her. She thought of Robert, of how to let him know something was wrong. She thought of the children, sleeping, unaware that she couldn't get to them if they needed her. And then she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, light, calculated, and Jessica's voice, soft, talking to someone. "It's okay, little ones. You can go back to sleep. Mama's here." Marina's blood ran cold. Jessica. It had been Jessica. She pounded on the door in desperation. "Jessica, Jessica, let me out. What are you doing?" Silence on the other side. Then the voice came, controlled but with a hint of madness. "You need to rest, Marina. You need to understand that you're not the only one capable of taking care of them. I can do it too. I'm going to prove it." Marina couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Jessica, this is insane. Open this door right now. The children need me." "They'll learn to need me," Jessica replied, and Marina heard the footsteps moving away. The terror was absolute. Marina went back, to forcing the door until her hands were red and sore. She tried to pull the doorknob off with her bare hands, scratching her fingers on the metal. She thought about breaking the window, but she was on the 22nd floor, and there was no way down. She screamed until her voice gave out, knowing no one would hear but unable to stop. The hours dragged on. Marina pressed her ear to the door, trying to catch any sound. All quiet. The children were sleeping. Jessica was probably sitting in the living room waiting, confident in her insane plan. But plans built on delusion have a peculiar way of falling apart. It was at 4:30 a.m. that Marina heard the first cry. Sophia. She knew that cry. It was hunger. The little girl always woke up at that time, wanting a bottle. Marina jumped up, pressing her ear to the door. She heard hurried footsteps, Jessica's voice trying to soothe her. "Shh, shh, it's okay." But Sophia didn't stop. The crying grew louder, more desperate, and then Lucas woke up. And Peter. All three crying at the same time, the kind of crying that quickly escalates to panic when it's not addressed in the right way. Marina banged on the door. "Jessica! Jessica, they're hungry. You need to make the bottles. 3 bottles, 6 ounces each. Warm filtered water, not hot. Jessica, are you listening to me?" On the other side, chaos. Marina could hear Jessica trying to calm 3 hysterical children at once. It wasn't working. Her voice was starting to panic too. "Stop crying! Please stop!" Her voice grew higher, more desperate. Marina tried to guide her through the door. "Go to the kitchen. The bottles are in the cabinet above the sink. The formula is in the cabinet next to it. You have to do it exactly as I told you." But Jessica wasn't listening or couldn't process it. The children's crying reached a deafening level. Marina heard a crash, the sound of breaking glass, and then a different kind of scream, a scream of pain. "Sophia." Marina's heart stopped. "Sophia, Sophia, Mama's here. Mama's coming." She threw herself against the door with a strength born of pure desperation. The wood was old, sturdy. Her hands were bleeding now, her nails broken. She didn't feel the pain, she only felt absolute terror. On the other side, a sudden silence. Not the silence of calm, but the silence of shock. And then Marina heard the most terrible thing she could possibly hear. Running footsteps, the front door opening, closing. Footsteps in the outside hallway, growing fainter. Jessica had fled. Marina was paralyzed for 2 seconds that felt like an eternity. Then a maternal instinct exploded inside her with primitive force. She started yelling, not for Jessica, but talking to the children through the door. "Lucas, Peter, Sophia, Mama's here. Mama's going to get out. You need to be strong." Her voice trembled, but she tried to sound calm. The cries started again, but they were different now. Cries looking for her. "Mama! Mama!" The 3 voices at once broke Marina's heart into 1,000 pieces. She spoke through the crack in the door, improvising, desperate. "Sophia, my love, are you hurt? Mama needs you to be brave. Peter, Lucas, you're the big brothers. Take care of Sophia. Stay together." Through the crack, Marina could see shadows moving. She heard Peter crying, "Mama," repeatedly. She heard Lucas trying to get to Sophia, his little voice trying to comfort her in the way he had seen Marina do so many times. She heard Sophia sobbing, the cry of pain mixed with the cry of fear. Marina kept talking, her voice failing between tears. "That's it, my loves. Stay together. Peter, can you get a towel? Those colorful towels in the bathroom. Can you bring it to Sophia?" She didn't know if they would understand. They were so little, but Peter, that quiet, observant baby, apparently did. Marina heard little noises, clumsy footsteps, something being dragged, and then his voice, proud. "Mama, looky." Marina broke. She broke completely but couldn't fall apart. "Very good, my love. Very good. Now put it on Sophia, where she has an OE. Gently." The instructions continued through the dawn. Marina guiding 3 scared babies through a locked door, trying to keep them all safe, trying not to collapse. She sang to them. She told them stories. She promised everything would be okay even though she didn't know if it would be. It was when the sun came up that Marina heard what sounded like a miracle. The elevator, hurried footsteps in the hallway, the key in the front door lock. Robert. He had received an alert from the apartment's security system. Atypical movement. Doors opening. At strange hours, full sensors activated. He had caught the first flight back, his heart pounding, imagining the worst. What he found was worse than he had imagined, and at the same time, a testament to something extraordinary. The 3 children huddled together in a corner of the living room, Lucas and Peter hugging Sophia, who had dried blood on her forehead, a small children's towel poorly placed over the wound. Toys scattered, a broken bottle on the floor, signs of a struggle. And Marina, trapped in the room, her bloody hands still trying to break down the door, her voice hoarse from talking. Robert opened the door with the spare key he kept in his office. Marina stumbled out and didn't look at him. She went straight to the children who, upon seeing her, burst into tears again, but it was a cry of relief, a cry of, "Mama's back." She hugged them, all 3 at once, checking each one, her hands trembling as she examined Sophia's wound. It wasn't deep, just a cut on her forehead, probably from a fall. But there was blood, a lot of dried blood, and Marina felt like her heart would never beat normally again. Robert called 911. Paramedics arrived, examined Sophia, said the wound was well cared for under the circumstances, a few stitches and she'd be fine. They examined Marina, too, bandaging her hands. They asked questions. Robert told them what little he knew. It was when they went back to review the internal security cameras that the full story was revealed. The recordings showed everything. Jessica entering with the key she had managed to copy weeks earlier during a visit. Jessica going to Marina's room, taking her phone which was charging in the living room. Jessica locking the bedroom door with that old key Marina didn't even know existed. Jessica trying to calm the children and failing miserably. The glass of water breaking, Sophia tripping on the shards, falling, hitting her head. Jessica panicking completely, and instead of calling for help, instead of letting Marina out, simply running away. The front door slamming. The children alone. Peter, not yet 2, fetching a towel. Lucas trying to wipe the blood from his sister's face. And Marina, on the other side of the door, talking non-stop, guiding, loving, even without being able to touch them. Robert watched the recordings, his hands shaking with rage. Every frame was evidence. Every second proved the cold cruelty of a plan that could have ended in tragedy. When Jessica returned hours later, trying to slip in discreetly through the service elevator, perhaps thinking she could make some excuse, invent some story, she found not the loving Robert, but a man transformed by the fury of a father who had almost lost everything. The confrontation was brief and glacial. She tried to explain with stumbling words, said she just wanted to prove her worth, that she didn't expect the children to react that way, that she thought it would be quick, that she got scared when she saw the blood. Each excuse sounded more pathetic than the last. Robert didn't want to hear it. His voice was controlled but lethal when he mentioned lawyers, false imprisonment, child endangerment, gross negligence, assault. Jessica turned pale and for the first time seemed to truly understand the gravity of what she had done. She tried one last gambit. "I love you, Robert. I just wanted a chance. I wanted to prove I could be good for them too. You don't understand the desperation of not being able to have your own children, of seeing those kids and knowing I'll never—" He cut her off with a coldness she had never seen in him. "So you decided to traumatize mine. You decided to lock up the only person they trust and leave them alone, hurt and terrified. Why? To prove a point? To satisfy your ego? Marina nearly broke down a door with her bare hands while you were here playing house." Jessica started to cry, but they were tears of self-pity, not genuine remorse. Robert was unmoved. "I want you out of here now, and if you ever try to contact us again, the children or Marina, I will sue you for everything you did tonight. The recordings are with my lawyer, is that clear?" She nodded between sobs, picked up the purse she had dropped on the sofa hours earlier, when it all still seemed like a clever plan, and walked out of that apartment for the last time. Out of that life, out of the opportunity she could have had if only she had chosen patience over desperation, humility over arrogance. Robert locked the door behind her and leaned his forehead against the cool wood, taking a deep breath. He had been so blind, so focused on rebuilding his life that he hadn't seen the signs. The growing tension, Marina's discomfort, Jessica's poorly disguised obsession. It had almost cost him everything. It had almost cost the safety of his children and the sanity of the one person who had truly cared for them from the beginning. He went back to the living room, where Marina was still sitting on the floor, the three children clinging to her as if they were afraid she would disappear if they let go. Sophia had stopped crying and was now just holding Marina's face with her little hands, touching it as if to verify it was real. Lucas had his thumb in his mouth, something he hadn't done in months, a clear regression from the trauma. Peter was simply hugging Marina's arm and not letting go. Robert knelt beside them. Marina looked at him, and for the first time since they had met, he saw anger in her eyes. A righteous, deserved anger. "Why didn't you tell me about the spare key? Why did you never mention that those old locks could be locked from the outside? Why did you let that woman have so much access without realizing what she was capable of?" He didn't have good answers, only weak excuses. "I didn't know. I trusted her. I thought I was doing the right thing by trying to move on." Marina shook her head, the tears finally falling. "You almost lost them, Robert. I almost couldn't protect them. And you know what's worse? Tonight made me realize something I've been denying for months. I love these children, as if they were my own. And that feeling terrifies me, because I know they're not. I know that one day you'll meet someone healthy this time, and I'll have to leave. And it will hurt as much as losing her, as much as losing the baby that was never born. Maybe it will hurt more, because this time I'll have to say goodbye to 3 pieces of my heart." Robert sat in silence, absorbing every word. Then he gently took her bandaged hand. "We're going to talk about all of this, about boundaries, about safety, about the future. But not now. Right now you need to rest. The children need you whole, and I need to process how close we came to a tragedy." Marina nodded, but she still didn't let go of the children, and they didn't let go of her. The days following the incident were a dense fog of doctor's appointments, difficult conversations and decisions that needed to be made. Sophia got stitches on her forehead, 3 small ones that would leave a minimal scar, but that Marina touched with guilt every time she looked at the little girl. The pediatrician confirmed she was physically fine, but recommended sessions with a child psychologist to process the trauma. All three children began to show signs of regression, waking up crying in the middle of the night, refusing to let Marina out of their sight for even a second. Marina wasn't well either. Her bandaged hands were a constant reminder of the night of horror. She had nightmares, where she heard the children crying but couldn't get to them, waking up sweaty and breathless, her heart racing. Robert insisted she also seek professional help. She resisted at first, arguing that she needed to be strong for the children, but he was firm. "You won't help anyone if you fall apart, Marina. Please let me take care of you too." It was the first time anyone had said that to her. "Let me take care of you." The words echoed for days. Marina agreed to see a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, whose office was on the Upper West Side. The sessions were difficult, stirring up old wounds Marina thought she had buried deep enough. The loss of her baby, the abandonment by her ex-partner, the constant fear of getting attached and losing again. And now, the night she almost failed to protect the children she loved. Robert also took practical, immediate action. He hired a specialized home security company that spent 3 days transforming the apartment. All the old doors were replaced with modern models, with electronic locks that couldn't be locked from the outside without an access code. The key locks were removed completely. An intercom system was installed in every room, with emergency buttons that connected directly to his and Marina's cell phones. Security cameras were upgraded with real-time monitoring and automatic alerts for any atypical movement. But the most significant change wasn't physical, it was emotional. Robert started working from home whenever possible, turning down trips that weren't absolutely essential. He participated in every decision related to the children, not just agreeing with what Marina suggested, but truly getting involved. He read about child development, asked questions, learned, and for the first time, he saw Marina not just as an exceptional employee, but as a whole person with her own pains, dreams, and needs. One evening, 2 weeks after the incident, he found her in the kitchen after the children had gone to sleep. Marina was making tea, her hands still a bit stiff from the recent scars. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Marina nodded and poured 2 cups. They sat at the table, the silence heavy between them. Robert took a deep breath. "I've spent the last few days thinking about everything that happened, and I realized I've been unfair to you in a way I hadn't even fully understood." He turned the cup in his hands. "I brought you here when I was desperate. I gave you an enormous responsibility, and all this time, I've leaned on you like you were an indestructible pillar. I never stopped to ask how you were doing. I never questioned if it was too much. I never offered you the same support you gave me." Marina listened in silence, her eyes fixed on her cup. Robert continued. "That night showed me something I should have seen a long time ago. You're not just someone who takes care of my children for money. You truly love them. And they love you in a way that can't be replaced or replicated. You are their mother in every sense that matters." The words broke something inside Marina. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. She wiped away the tears that fell without permission. Robert went on, his own voice now thick with emotion. "And I was selfish to try to force someone else into this dynamic without considering what it was doing to you, without realizing that you were silently sacrificing yourself so I could have a chance at romantic happiness. Jessica was a terrible error in judgment, but even before she revealed who she really was, I was already wrong for allowing you to feel threatened, disposable." Marina finally managed to speak. "I was afraid to say anything. I was afraid you'd think I was overstepping my boundaries, that I was trying to take a place that wasn't mine." She wiped her face with the sleeve of her shirt. "Because it's not my place, Robert. As much as I love these children, they're not mine. And I knew that one day you would want to rebuild your life, start a new family, and I would just be the nanny who needed to learn to keep her distance." Robert shook his head vigorously. "No, you're not just the nanny, and this house is already a family. Maybe not a traditional one, maybe not what I planned when I got married years ago, but it's real. You, me, Lucas, Peter, and Sophia. This is our family, and I don't want it to change." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't uncomfortable but filled with unspoken possibilities. Marina looked at Robert, really looked, perhaps for the first time. She saw not just her boss, the widowed father, the man who had his life together. She saw someone as lost as she had been, someone who was trying to do the best he could with the hand life had dealt him. She saw a partner. She saw a friend. And something more that she wasn't ready to name. Robert felt her gaze and held it. "I'm not asking for anything more than you can give. I'm not making declarations or creating expectations. I'm just saying that you have a value here that goes far beyond your job. That I see you, that I'm grateful, and that if you decide to stay, it's not just because the children need you, it's because I need you too." Marina didn't answer with words. She just placed her hand over his on the table. It was a small gesture, but it said everything that needed to be said. The following months brought a gradual transformation. The therapist who saw the children also started family sessions that included Marina and Robert. They learned to communicate better, to express their needs, to set healthy boundaries. Marina now had 2 days off a week, something Robert insisted on despite her protests. "You need to have your own life," he argued. "You need to rest, see friends, do things that don't involve diapers and baby food." Marina used that time to take care of herself in ways she had forgotten. She went to the salon, got her nails done, the ones that had been destroyed that terrible night, and walked in Central Park just thinking about nothing. Slowly, she felt herself becoming a whole person again, instead of just a function. The children were growing too. Lucas turned 2 and was speaking in full sentences, always with the comical seriousness of someone who takes himself very seriously. Peter developed a passion for books and asked for stories 5 times a day. Sophia, who wore the small scar on her forehead like a badge of honor, became even more determined, leading her brothers on adventures through the house that left Marina exhausted but happy. It was on a Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the incident, that Marina noticed something different. A morning sickness that wouldn't go away, a tenderness in her breasts, a period that was now 3 weeks late. She bought a pharmacy pregnancy test with trembling hands. She took it alone in her bathroom, waited the 3 longest minutes of her life, and looked at the 2 pink lines that confirmed the impossible. She was pregnant. Panic came first. The memories of the last pregnancy, of the loss, of the unbearable pain. But along with the panic came something different. Hope. Small, fragile, but real. Marina made an appointment with an obstetrician the next day without telling anyone. She needed to be sure first. She needed to know if this time would be different. The tests confirmed it. 8 weeks, a healthy embryo, a strong heartbeat, but they also revealed something the doctor explained carefully. She had a marginal placenta previa, a risk factor that would require frequent monitoring and relative bed rest. The pregnancy would be considered moderate risk due to her history of prior loss. Marina listened to it all, feeling the floor disappear from under her feet. It was Robert who noticed something was wrong. Marina was quieter, more distant. She refused coffee in the morning, something she never did. She had bouts of nausea she tried to hide. One night he found her on her balcony, hugging her knees, staring into space. "Marina, what's going on? Are you sick? Should I call a doctor?" She looked at him, her eyes red. "I'm pregnant, Robert." The sentence came out like a confession, like a weight she could no longer carry alone. Robert froze, processing it. Pregnant? But whose? When? The questions died before they were verbalized because they didn't matter. What mattered was the terror stamped on her face. He sat down next to her on the cold balcony floor. "You're scared," he stated softly. "I'm terrified," Marina admitted, her voice breaking. "I've been through this before, Robert. I felt a baby grow inside me and then lost it. I've set up a nursery that was never used. I've chosen a name that will never be called. And now it's happening again, and the doctors say it's a high-risk pregnancy, and I don't know if I can go through it again. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Robert didn't offer empty motivational advice. He didn't say everything would be okay when he couldn't guarantee it. He just said, "You're not going through this alone." He took her hand. "Last time you were alone. This time you have a whole family here. The children, me, the doctors. We're going to do everything right. We're going to surround you with care until this baby is born healthy." Marina looked at him and saw absolute sincerity. She nodded slowly, allowing herself for the first time to believe that maybe it was possible, that maybe this time the ending would be different. Robert took control with military efficiency. He hired a second caregiver to help Marina with the triplets, ignoring her protests. He reorganized the entire household routine so Marina could rest more. He accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, took notes, and asked questions she couldn't formulate. The triplets, with that intuition children have, sensed something was happening. Sophia would spend hours with her hand on Marina's still small belly, talking to the baby in her own incomprehensible language. Lucas became even more protective, bringing her pillows and blankets whenever he thought Marina looked tired. Peter drew babies on every piece of paper he could find, abstract art that Marina cherished. The pregnancy progressed with extreme care. Marina rested when necessary, took all the prescribed supplements and avoided stress. There were a few scares along the way. A light bleed at 15 weeks sent her rushing to the hospital. High blood pressure at 20 weeks resulted in a 2-day hospital stay. Each scare was a new layer of trauma but also of resilience. Robert was there for all of it. He held her hand during the ultrasounds, wiped her tears when the fear became too much, and slept in the uncomfortable hospital chair when she had to be admitted, and at some point without either of them. Noticing exactly when, gratitude transformed into something deeper. It was at 32 weeks that Marina went into premature labor. The hospital was 15 minutes away, but it felt like hours. Robert drove with one hand, the other holding Marina's as she breathed through the contractions. The triplets stayed with the new caregiver and Robert's mother, who had come from Stamford specifically to help. The delivery was complicated. The baby was breech, requiring an emergency C-section. Marina was wheeled into the operating room, terrified but not alone. Robert, in scrubs and a mask, held her hand while the doctors worked. And then, after 32 weeks of fear and hope, after months of extreme care, a cry cut through the air. A strong, indignant, living cry. Marina burst into tears. So did Robert. The doctor announced, "It's a girl. She's breathing well on her own. Great vitals." The baby went straight to the NICU as a precaution due to her prematurity, but she was stable, strong, a fighter. She had her mother's dark eyes and was completely bald, which made Marina laugh through her tears. They named her Helena. Light, hope, a new beginning. Helena spent 21 days in the NICU, gaining weight and strength. Marina spent all day at the hospital, only leaving at night to see the triplets who missed her, but understood in their own way that she was taking care of their baby sister. Robert divided his time between the hospital, the work he could no longer completely ignore, and the children at home. It was during one of those nightly visits, as Marina was breastfeeding Helena for the first time outside the incubator, that Robert said what he had been holding back for months. "I love you, Marina," he said simply and directly. "Not as a boss or a friend. I love you as a man, as the father of the children you helped raise, as the partner of the mother of my 4th child. I love you, and I want us to be a real family, officially." Marina looked at him, holding Helena, who was nursing peacefully. She looked at the man who had been patient when she needed time, strong when she needed support, present when she needed to know she wasn't alone. "I love you too," she replied. "I think I have for longer than I'd like to admit." They didn't get married right away. There was no rush. First, they brought Helena home and watched the triplets meet their little sister with a mixture of fascination and jealousy that was completely normal. They adjusted to the new routine of 4 children instead of 3. They learned to be a couple at the same time they were already parents. The wedding took place a year later, simple and intimate. Just close family, the triplets as clumsy ring-bearers, Helena in her paternal grandmother's arms. Marina wore a simple champagne-colored dress and held a bouquet of white lilies. Robert didn't take his eyes off her for the entire ceremony. The children grew up in a house full of love but also of scars. Sophia still had the mark on her forehead, a permanent reminder of that night. Marina had the scars on her hands, which the children would touch with reverence, especially when someone asked where they came from. She never lied. She told the story simply, appropriately for their age. She told them about the night Mama couldn't get to them, but never stopped fighting. About how sometimes love means not giving up even when it seems impossible. The years also brought healing. The therapy sessions continued even after the immediate trauma had passed, because they all understood that mental health isn't something you treat and forget. It's something you cultivate. The apartment never had locked doors again. The old locks were kept only as reminders in a drawer, a symbol of how things used to be. Robert never again let work or anything else come between him and his family. Marina learned to accept that she deserved to be cared for as much as she cared for others. The children learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about who stays, who fights, who chooses you every single day. Helena grew up hearing the story of how she almost didn't happen, of how she was awaited with so much fear and so much love. She grew up with 3 older siblings who protected her fiercely, and a mother whose scarred hands told stories of courage that no book could ever teach. On Sunday afternoons, when the house was in its usual organized chaos, Marina would sometimes stop and just watch. Robert helping Lucas with his homework, Peter reading to Helena, Sophia dancing in the living room to music that was way too loud, and she would feel her chest swell in that way only true love can. She had lost so much, a baby she never knew, years of pain that seemed endless. But somewhere in the middle of all that pain, she had found not just survival, but purpose. Not just a job, but a calling. Not just shelter, but a home. Not just children to care for, but children to love. Not just a man, but a whole life. The scars remained, on Marina's hands, on Sophia's forehead, in all of their hearts. But scars are just proof that something tried to break you and failed. They are a testament that you survived, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, they are the map that guides you to exactly where you were always meant to be. Marina looked at her marked hands, then at her family scattered around the living room. She smiled, because she finally understood that some things don't have to be perfect to be true. Some families don't start with a wedding and a planned pregnancy. Some start with shared pain, nights that are far too long, and the simple but powerful decision not to give up on each other. The rain tapped against the windows, just like that March afternoon so many years ago when she had arrived with her worn-out suitcase and her broken heart. But this time, the rain didn't seem sad. It just seemed like rain. And inside that apartment on the 22nd floor were 5 noisy children, a man who had learned that love doesn't replace but adds, and a woman whose scars told the most beautiful story of all. The story that it's worth staying. It's worth fighting. It's worth believing that after the storm always comes the light. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Marina, Robert and their children has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of love, resilience and family, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul and remind us that even in the most difficult situations, love and courage can transform everything. We'll see you in the next episode with a new story that will make you reflect on the bonds that truly matter in life.